Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Daly. I spent 20 years with United Press International, most of it with the old UPI Radio Network. And my favorite assignment was going on the road producing and hosting American Montage. It was an hour-long weekly program. Now here's an edited version of one of those shows. You know, many of you know that I have never been a morning person except when I've really had to get up early. But one of the bad things about not being up of a morning is not being able to hear the Osgood File on CBS Radio. For years, Charles Osgood has delighted all of us with his poetry and his prose and his keen wit. He makes us smile. He gets us up in the morning and off to work or wherever we're going with a much more gentle and wonderful feeling. Charles Osgood is my guest this week. Before going on the air, I mentioned that Charlie, that's what I was going to say. I feel more comfortable calling you Charlie than Charles. How long have you been doing the Osgood report, the Osgood File of a morning on CBS, and how long has it been multiple broadcasts?
You know, I have been doing either the Osgood File or some other show just like the Osgood File, but with a different name, for about 35 years now.
Mm-hmm. Have you always done poetry?
Poetry sort of snuck in there along the line somewhere. It was never really my intention to do poetry, but when you're doing 4 different shows each day, sometimes you look for different ways of doing things. And I started doing that while I was working for the local radio station for WCBS Radio here in New York.
I must say that over the years, those of us who love broadcasting have a great affinity for CBS. I worked at an affiliate in southern Indiana for 10 years and got to know a lot of the people in New York. I guess I'm old enough to still have that slavish devotion to the Edward R. Murrow era, of whom I guess Dan Shore is about the only one left from there. But I've always thought that when it comes to news, and particularly gentle things, such as Charles Kuralt did over the years, you guys really know how to do it best.
I think that people have often said that it seems strange that CBS News had been able, over all those years, to come up with people like Walter Cronkite and Severide, Murrow. Bill Moyers was at CBS before he moved on to public television, and as you say, Kuralt, maybe Kuralt more than almost anybody. But then, and also Andy Rooney,
sure,
and I don't know. It just seems that to work here and walk the halls during all of those years, but even still today, it is. They've been very fortunate, and I think part of it is that they have not insisted on one particular style. You know, you did not have to have a certain kind of a voice or come from a certain part of the country. You didn't have to sound like a radio announcer, and I think as a consequence that they got people who had good experience as writers, good experience as journalists, and that was always given top priority.
Well, I don't know whether anyone listening can relate to this, but I'm hearing Alexander Kendrick and Hughes Rudd in my ear. And if you take 2 of those gentlemen, they had probably the least radio-voiced gift. People would say, you guys don't belong in broadcasting, but they were great.
Well, Alexander can't excuse to talk sort of like that, and Hughes was so down home boy from Texas, and it showed up in things that he did. But those guys were 2 of the most erudite people that you would ever see.
Oh, I know, and I remember on Sundays it used to be it was the World This Week that Kendrick. You're right. He sounded like a gangster. Almost.
Well, he sounded as the voice sounded as if you might be typecast as a gangster. Yes. But he really knew his stuff, and of course Hughes was one of the best writers that this business has ever seen. He was he was able to say things in a very sort of simple and direct and sometimes very funny way.
There's still something to be said for the power of the human voice, and for the most part, I don't hear it a lot anymore. I mean, I'm not enthralled by a lot of people. Maybe that's shallow of me, but I mean that's where you excel. It's not only your writing; it's the way you speak it.
In the radio days, and by the way, these are still the radio days. But I think before television came along, all you had was your voice, and so it was considered more important then. But even in those days, as we've said, I mean, people like Hughes and like Alex Kendrick and a lot of others that I could think of did not necessarily have the big pipes that you associate with radio broadcasters. And I think some of the people who did well in news in radio were people who had been in acting before, who had. I'm talking about people like Paul Harvey and people like Mike Wallace.
Oh, sure. People don't know Mike did a lot of TV drama, didn't he?
Yes, he did, and a lot of commercials as well. the thing that Mike can do is he has a compelling way of expressing himself, and he can ad lib as well as anybody else in this business. So he's not somebody that sort of depends on a script to do it. And he can do everything that you need to do in this business. And at the age of 80, he's still doing it better than almost anybody.
Yeah, what amazes me, and maybe I'm not totally sounding self-serving here, but I'm a pretty good ad-libber. Sometimes I don't even write things down. But what amazes me is when you go to a stakeout, like I covered the end of the second Simpson trial, the people who were out there covering that trial for a year who couldn't do a live report after it was over without looking at their notes.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of talking heads out there, unfortunately, who can't ad-lib their way out of a paper sack, but they look nice.
Well, and of course, looking nice is important in television, and it's not important at all in radio. And that's why I've always thought of myself as a guy who had I have a face. I was born for radio. I still think of myself not as a TV guy who does some radio shows, but as a radio guy who does a television show.
Mm-hmm. This is 5 years now you've been doing this, right?
That's right. To me, that's amazing. It feels more like about 5 minutes.
How early do you have to get up?
Well, people say, how early do you have to get up on Sunday morning? Because that thing goes on at 9 o'clock. On the East Coast, it goes on from 9 to 10:30. But actually, Sunday morning is my morning to sleep in. I sleep until 5 o'clock on Sunday morning. And during the rest of the week, I get up at 2:30 in the morning. And that's because the short-form broadcasts that I do on radio really do have to be written, because they have to be produced, and they last a given length of time, and so you have to decide in advance what you're going to do and start writing it in advance. So that requires going in early. So my routine is to set the alarm for 2:30 each morning, which is, I don't know if you ever have worked a morning shift, but
oh, yes.
I can assure you that the 2:30 in the morning has nothing to do with the morning at all. It's the middle of the night.
Did you know Edward P. Morgan in Washington?
Yes, I did. I used to work for ABC. Edward P. Morgan did a broadcast that was sponsored by the
AFL-CIO. Yep,
that's right. Frank Harden of the morning team of Harden and Weaver was the announcer on that broadcast for years and years, and he'd say, I don't know,
it was the 13.5 million Americans who bring, long, I hate to keep talking over you, but anyway, sometime off the air I'll tell you my story about Morgan. But the reason I ask is I was in Washington as a 17-year-old, and Edward P. Morgan had me in the studio 3 days. And I asked him, I said, Mr. Morgan, I want to be a correspondent. What should I do to learn all about radio? And his answer to me was, don't learn all about radio, learn all about the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wondered what you would say to students who see where broadcasting is going and wonder if radio is going to last forever, who really want to get into this business. Well, what would you say to them?
Well, I certainly have said to my own children, and I would say to young people who ask me, I did not major in communication arts. I did not major in journalism, and I didn't major in broadcasting, although all of those things were possible majors at Fordham when I went there. I think a liberal arts background is the best that you can get, and if you focus on broadcasting as a subject, you're going to find out that the things that you learn how to do are probably going to be obsolete in 2 weeks. It's not a question. The idea of camera technique or mic technique or tape editing, I mean, all of these things. They didn't have tape when I started doing this. In fact, I think the technology will continue to change, and that's not what you have to learn. What you have to learn is how to think, and for that, a liberal arts background. Study the humanities, learn about those things that reflect the human condition. Learn how to think and learn how to care and to feel about the things that go on, and then you can the other stuff you can learn more easily.
Well, Charlie, for those of us who love the sound of the human voice and a literate turn of phrase, you have brought us an awful lot of joy over the years, and keep going.
Thank you, Dennis, and it's been a pleasure talking with you.
And there you have it, another edited episode of one of the American Montage programs prepared for the UPI Radio Network back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going with me this week. And check YouTube for more American Montage programs.